The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of July 20, 2025. The podcast that made me do it. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's seriate the news of the bogus. We'll start with good news and an update to a story from several years ago, particularly the 2016 election where Douglas Mackey was prosecuted for a meme. Under the handle Ricky Vaughn, he posted to social media a snarky meme, one that wasn't even original but was an old joke among both parties, telling voters that if they wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton, they could skip the line and just text a certain number. It was an obvious joke that had already been made by people on the right and the left, saying it about either candidate. Vote for Trump, skip the line and text it in. Or, remember to vote Republican on Wednesday when Election Day is Tuesday. In what can only be described as one of the most insane breakdowns of justice since the William Penn trial, Mackey was convicted of being part of a conspiracy to, quote, injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate persons in the free exercise and enjoyment of the right to vote, using a law held over from the Jim Crow era. He was arrested and indicted just 2 days after Joe Biden took office. The entire prosecution was a clear First Amendment violation and should never have been let in the door. But that can be a problem with conspiracy laws. They can take a single legal action or a series of perfectly legal actions and make them illegal somehow. Here's a hint. Mackey is from Florida, but he was prosecuted and tried in the Eastern District of New York. Why? Because that's where they could find a jury insane enough to convict him. Blatant venue shopping, which also violated his Sixth Amendment right to a trial, quote, by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. Well, they just said, basically, he posted it on the internet, and they have the internet in Brooklyn, so EDNY it is. And yes, that means that, if they can get away with that, then you can pick any district in the country you want and prosecute someone there as long as you can find a judge corrupt enough to go along with it. So they did all of that and got their corrupt, unjust conviction. Thankfully, the Second Circuit just threw it out, but not for any of the constitutional reasons. They just said that the prosecution hadn't actually alleged a conspiracy. Quote, Congress expressly limited Section 241's reach to conspiracies. There are several reasons why Congress may have done so, but the critical point is that Congress made this choice, one it has declined to deviate from in the more than 150 years since Section 241's enactment. The prosecution tried to claim that being part of a Twitter mob made you a conspiracy. The Second Circuit wasn't having that. Quote, at trial, the government's evidence consisted predominantly of tweets and messages distributed on Twitter. Although the government called 19 witnesses to the stand, it was, in the government's words, fundamentally a document case. Mackey testified in his own defense. In addition to claiming, as discussed above, that he did not view the relevant war room posts, he denied having shared the memes with the intent to threaten, intimidate, oppress, or injure anyone's right to vote. The government presented no evidence that Mackey participated in the conspiracy's formation. The government presented no evidence at trial that Mackey's tweets tricked anyone into failing properly to vote. It was basically guilt by association, something the Constitution also prohibits. They ruled, for these reasons, we reverse Mackey's conviction and remand the case to the district court with instructions to enter a judgment of acquittal. Which is good for Mackey, but that still leaves open this kind of prosecution for pure speech and the corrupt venue shopping they engaged in. Those are things that should never be allowed, but sadly, the Second Circuit seems to be fine with them. That's just out-and-out lawfare that seriously needs to be smacked down by every single circuit and the Supreme Court.
Sometimes you just have to stomp some skulls. From the mind of Mr. Dapperton, a game for the ages. In a world where a race of undead furries tries to take over the world's nuclear arsenal, one man must stop them. But which man? You choose. The Orange Overlord.
Ow, my ear!
Bernie Slanders. Debate Dominator.
My kip was ruined.
Or Joe Sleepy.
Build me back.
And of course, Mr. Fancy Pants himself.
Forget those losers! You can get the Gold Edition and play as 4 more characters, including me, the Spooky Spaceman, along with Billionaire Brat, Professor Proof, and the easiest way to play, as Jesus himself!
7 complete different worlds, with more coming all the time. Full controller support. You can even get eaten by a worm and pooped out into a furry cathedral.
And don't forget that Gold Edition, where you can play the ultimate challenge, Devil's Doorstep.
This gory satirical adventure pulls no punches. You know you want this game. Go to links.bogosity.tv/skullstompers and play Skull Stompers now.
It hasn't taken Trump long in his second term to go against the Second Amendment, and this time he deserves extra brickbats because it's a law he technically violated. A couple of years ago, Trump bought a Glock in Summerville, South Carolina, which idiots hit the ceiling about because he had been indicted for a felony, even though you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But the real issue is interstate gun purchases. Trump is a resident of Florida, so technically he shouldn't have been allowed to purchase a firearm in South Carolina without arranging shipment to a Florida FFL. A lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas is challenging that. The claim is that, based on the Supreme Court's Bruin decision, the law is unconstitutional because it, quote, imposes a hardship on plaintiffs who frequently travel and wish to purchase handguns directly from licensed dealers without having to coordinate transferring them to an FFL in their home states. They also note that Bruin requires a historical analysis of a tradition of such regulation, and the earliest known state residency requirement on the restriction of firearms wasn't until 1909. That was back in January. What's making this news now is that the Trump administration is filing to dismiss the case in complete violation of Trump's public avowal to uphold the Second Amendment. In a filing, Trump's ATF said, quote, these laws, which prevent individuals from making an end run around their state's firearms regulations by crossing a border, were passed to ensure only law-abiding citizens acquired firearms and keep firearms out of the hands of potentially dangerous individuals. Laws such as these, which are aimed at ensuring that firearms do not fall into the hands of criminals, generally do not violate the Second Amendment. Accordingly, the court should dismiss the case. They claimed, the law passes constitutional muster. The challenged regime facilitates compliance with state law and advances Congress's interests in precluding dangerous individuals and criminals from obtaining handguns. Isn't that pretty much exactly the kind of balancing of interests that SCOTUS explicitly rejected in Bruin? Quote, at the same time, it only modestly burdens the right to keep and bear arms, serves legitimate objectives, and aligns with the nation's regulatory tradition of regulating firearm ownership. Nothing in that framework, for example, prohibits the purchase of any type of handgun for any lawful purpose. But the Second Amendment doesn't say shall not be prohibited, it says shall not be infringed. That passage I just quoted comes right after the ATF saying that the law, quote, unquestionably burdens the fundamental right to keep and bear arms. Well, then it infringes, doesn't it? That's the point the plaintiffs made in a briefing filed the other day, quote, despite its apparent concession, the government nevertheless glancingly makes arguments that could be construed as textual when it suggests that the burden on the right created by the ban, which it claims is modest and carefully tailored or minimal and tailored, is so insignificant that they cannot be said to infringe the right. But the determination whether a law infringes the right to keep and bear arms is not made by analyzing the extent to which a law is modest and carefully tailored, but rather by applying Bruin's text-then-history analysis. At the plain text stage, the question is whether acquiring a firearm outside of a person's state of residence implicates the plain text of the Second Amendment, and the government concedes that it does. That means that the ban presumptively infringes the Second Amendment, and it is incumbent upon the government to rebut that presumption by demonstrating that the law is consistent with this nation's history of firearm regulation. If the government cannot, then the ban conclusively infringes the Second Amendment. After all, at the founding, to infringe simply meant to violate. They also pointed out that the law, quote, effectively gives in-state dealers a veto on the ability of residents of their state to take their business to another state and buy firearms from competitors elsewhere. Unsurprisingly, this manifests functionally as both a logistical and a monetary tax on the right to keep and bear arms, as not all retailers will agree to perform interstate transfer services, and those that do typically charge a significant fee for the privilege. The government cited some laws that they claimed fit Bruin's criteria for historical tradition, but as plaintiffs pointed out, quote, the earliest of these laws dates to 1642 and the latest to 1677. None were enacted within 100 years of the Second Amendment's ratification, and every single one of them predates even the English Bill of Rights' more limited guarantee of the right to keep and bear arms. So they argue that the law should be held unconstitutional. Here's hoping the court agrees. But what of the fact that this is a law that Trump himself violated? That not only makes Trump not a libertarian, but a hypocrite in the same league with Biden and Obama.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
Okay, let's look at some good news. More AIs are good. More open source AIs are awesome, and that's just what's coming out of Switzerland. ETH Zurich and the Swiss Federal Technology Institute have announced a pair of LLMs made using the Alps supercomputer, the third most powerful supercomputer in Europe and eighth worldwide. Alps is a 10-megawatt Cray cluster with ARM v9 CPUs, NVIDIA Grace Hopper 200s, and Hopper H100 tensor cores for a total speed of 270 petaflops and 144 terabytes of storage. And even better, the Alps is powered entirely by hydropower, so clean energy that can instantly be ramped up or down to meet demand. Its cooling system also supplies hot water to the nearby city of Lugano. Okay, enough nerding out about the supercomputer. Let's nerd out about the AI. They demoed the new LLM at the International Open Source LLM Builders Summit and said it will be a fully open, publicly developed LLM. After its final testing phase, the model will be available under an open license, source code under the Apache 2.0 license, and the training data will be transparent and reproducible. Project lead Emanuel Schlag said, quote, fully open models enable high-trust applications and are necessary for advancing research about the risks and opportunities of AI. Transparent processes also enable regulatory compliance. The LLM is fluent in over 1,000 languages, with 60% of its training based in English as well as code and mathematics. It was trained on over 15 trillion high-quality tokens, each of which represents a word or part of a word. The main model will be 70 billion parameters, ranking it alongside the big boys, and also an 8 billion parameter version suitable for running on home computers. They haven't specified a date for the release, only that it will be late summer. Meta, I think these guys just one-upped you. You've been positioning your open source llama as the standard bearer for people wanting to run their own AI independent of some corporation's servers and permission. You're figuring that this will translate into billions for you. Well, I think you'd better step up your game.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now it's time to pre-calculate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And this week it's Gavin Newsom who, 5 years later, still won't answer basic questions about the ridiculous and harmful COVID mandates we attacked him and others for at the time. He appeared on the Sean Ryan Show when he was asked the question, originating from Joe Rogan.
So this is from Joe Rogan.
Oh, God.
Oh, God is right. He knows it's going to be a hard one.
Who will be held accountable for mandating COVID-19 vaccines for children, which were unnecessary and ineffective?
By the way, the CDC does not recommend COVID-19 vaccines for healthy children without consultation with a pediatrician. This is the state vaccine mandate required by all school children in October 2021, which was delayed and then quietly abandoned in early 2023.
And who will take responsibility for the unprecedented increases in myocarditis and cancer cases among them?
This is a bit more nuanced. There is a known increase in myocarditis due to Moderna vaccines, a risk concentrated in teen males. We're talking a rare side effect and mild cases of myocarditis, but still real, and exactly the kind of thing we could have found out about a bit earlier if we'd had a proper vaccine rollout like I said initially. I can't find any evidence of an increased cancer risk, nor is there any plausible mechanism by which it could do so. Cancer is caused by mutations and degradations in your DNA, but mRNA doesn't enter the cell's nucleus, is degraded quickly as it's processed just like every other mRNA sequence happening constantly in your cells, and has no way of integrating into your genome. You're actually more likely to get cancer from a SARS-CoV-2 infection because of the overactivation of cytokines. Anyway, let's get to the rest of the question and Newsom's so-called answer.
Second to that, do you feel any remorse for that draconian decision that was obviously heavily influenced by the pharmaceutical companies' desire for maximum profit?
Yeah, I've signed some of the most progressive laws against big pharma in the country, so I have receipts on that.
Bully for you. That's not what he asked.
California, like many states, red states included, Florida included, moved forward early in the pandemic, working with the Trump administration.
Yeah, red states did it too. Trump was all about it as well. But how about answering the question instead of pointing the finger at others?
What's interesting about this process is none of us have really reviewed in an objective way. It's all through the lens of politics. what we did right and what we did wrong.
Yeah, that is a problem, isn't it, Newsom?
I've asked our team to put together an objective review of everything we did right, everything we did wrong.
Oh, okay, you're still promising to do it. Well, all right then, as long as you're promising.
I mean, Florida shut down their bars and restaurants before California.
Oh, God, just shut up about what other states did and answer the question.
So with humility, seriously, humility and grace, I've asked them to have that report done. It's going to be done next month.
Do you pinky swear? Geez, I mean, even if he does surprisingly do this, it's been 4 years. Why would you wait that long to even ask the question?
And I know everyone's a goddamn genius now in hindsight.
Hey, check the podcast archives. People knew about this. People warned about this. This is not hindsight bias. It's what you should have been paying attention to all along. Speaking with people who disagreed with you and finding out the best approach is something you should have done at the time. Not censor them on social media. And you can't even admit it now. All you can do is pretend that you were right somehow, even though you were wrong, and pretend that no one else knew it at the time when plenty of people did. And you just engage in gaslighting to cover it up. There are a lot of other clips from this interview in the X thread linked to in the show notes, including him stammering excuses for lying about gun deaths. But the one I played, that was the worst. There aren't many words I can use that convey the level of disgust I have for this man. All I have, really, is to name Gavin Newsom this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-age children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now let's obstrupulationalificate this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And this week it goes to Josh Hawley, who chaired the Senate Judiciary Committee in an all-out attack on free speech and fair use. The hearing was called Too Big to Prosecute? Examining the AI industry's mass injection of copyrighted works for AI training. And it used AI training as an excuse to screech for the destruction of fair use protections that have been in place for a century. Remember, fair use is a fundamental human right based on our First Amendment right to freedom of speech, and several cases make this clear, including Eldred v. Ashcroft, Harper and Row, Campbell v. Cuff Rose, among others. By the way, this isn't the first time Hawley has used big tech as an excuse to destroy the Constitution. We've discussed previously his opposition of basic conduit protections as specified in Section 230. Understand, this is not something that's a response to the threat of AI. That's just the latest excuse. This assault on our digital rights from the copyright cartels goes back at least as far as Universal v. Corley. So let's listen to some of Hawley's remarks.
We're talking about piracy. We're talking about theft. For years, AI companies have stolen massive amounts of copyrighted material from illegal online repositories. But have these big tech companies been prosecuted? No, of course not. They're getting off scot-free.
But once again, The whole point of fair use is that if the use is fair, you don't need permission to obtain them. In fact, permission would completely negate the need for fair use. And we'll see as we go through a lot of the testimony that this is exactly what they want, to destroy fair use and to make 100% of all human output subject to the big content cartels. Just listen to it from Senator Dick Durbin's mouth.
Should AI companies be able to use their materials freely as, quote, fair use, unquote?
Hey, Dick, what's with the quote unquote? Yes, he's trying to undermine the entire concept of fair use.
As Anthropic's CEO put it, Anthropic had many places from which it could have purchased, but it preferred to steal them to avoid, quote, legal practice business slog, whatever that means.
Lie, 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 lie! In fact, as I covered on my YouTube channel, plaintiffs acknowledged that there was no such licensing system, nor was one likely to form anytime soon. But regardless of that, Judge William Alsop found, quote, even so, such a market for that use is not one the Copyright Act entitles authors to exploit.
As a judge in the Meta case recently put it, quote, companies have been unable to resist the temptation to feed copyright-protected materials into their models without getting permission from the copyright holders or paying them for the right to use their works for this purpose.
Oh, you lying scumbag! Judge Vince Chabria actually said the same thing as Alsop, quote, this market is not one that the plaintiffs are legally entitled to monopolize. In every fair use case, the plaintiff suffers a loss of a potential market if that potential market is defined as the theoretical market for licensing the use at issue in the case. Therefore, to prevent the fourth factor analysis from becoming circular and favoring the rights holder in every case, harm from the loss of fees paid to license a work for a transformative purpose is not cognizable. Their witnesses included Max Pritt, one of the ambulance chasers at Boys Schiller that's suing Meta and who had no compunction about lying about the case at every turn, Mike Smith of Carnegie Mellon University, whose cherry-picked studies with bad methodology go against all of the other industry studies which show that piracy has no ultimate effect on sales, as we've covered several times, and arguably the worst of the lot, law professor Bhamati Viswanathan, whose dishonesty included crap like this.
If you and I stole books from the library or from a bookstore and said, I need to train, I need to learn, I need to develop my mind, we wouldn't argue that this is fair use.
Whereas not only the Copyright Act and the courts, but also the Copyright Office itself all say that a computer algorithm is not the same as a human being, and both judges ruled that ingestion by an algorithm is not the same as being read by a human. She engaged in a lot of the same kind of begging the question both judges argued against. For example,
but you don't go to pirate websites to get that material if what you want to do is legal.
Again, if it's fair use, it is legal regardless of how you obtained it. That's why it's fair use, not fair obtaining. Her whole argument throughout her testimony basically boiled down to using pirate sites automatically means you're guilty and you don't even bother with that pesky fair use analysis. And she even went against the established facts of the case.
At the same time, you can send them out. That's called seeding. You can send them out at the same time. Uploading and downloading exist at the same time. This is a peer-to-peer process. So not only are you taking in these pirated materials, you are also distributing them.
When first, that's limited to Meta and wasn't even alleged in Anthropic. And second, Meta detailed at least 3 ways they prevented seeding even while downloading. The first is that they turned off seeding in the client, and the second is they used several other settings, such as setting the upload bandwidth to 0 to prevent seeding while downloading. And the third, and this one really should be sufficient on its own, when they set up the firewall rules to allow torrenting, they only allowed incoming data. Any attempt by the client to upload any blocks, any attempt by anyone else to so much as even request them, would have been denied. Meta's expert Barbara Fredrickson Cross made that clear, and plaintiffs provided absolutely nothing to refute it. And since fact and expert discovery are both closed in the case, that's that. I guess these people are counting on us not knowing that. Well, at least listeners to this podcast are immune to their lies. There was a lot of fawning over New York Times best-selling author David Baldacci as well. Among all of their witnesses, they only had one actual expert who knew what he was talking about and who argued with anything other than bad analogies and emotional pandering. That was Edward Lee, professor of law at Santa Clara University School of Law. And he made several points that hit the nail right on the head. For example,
critically, in the cases against Anthropic and Meta, the judges concluded the plaintiffs did not show the models had produced any infringing outputs of the plaintiff's works.
And his was the only sane voice, arguing that at the very least, Congress should wait and see what happens in the courts first.
The United States National Priority in AI counsels caution. Indeed, in Google versus Oracle, another technology fair use case of national importance, the United States Supreme Court itself cautioned, quote unquote, given the rapidly changing technological, economic, and business-related circumstances, we believe we should not answer more than is necessary to resolve the parties' dispute. At this juncture, I think the best approach is for Congress to wait and see how other district courts, the courts of appeals, and potentially the United States Supreme Court resolves these difficult issues, including access to pirated shadow libraries, in the many pending copyright lawsuits across the country.
So just listen to a bit of the questioning.
Even Justice Story in Emerson versus Davies recognized that not everything in a book is protected by copyright. Authors build on the past books to write new books, and that fuels creation. And here, the line that Judge Chabria and Alsop drew in terms of non-infringing output, there is no copyright claim in the production of non-infringing works.
It looks to me like you're shifting the burden to the author of the creative work when there's an assertion of fair use here. So Meta or others can virtually steal this creative product of Mr. Baldacci and others, and then he has the responsibility of proving that there's been an economic loss to him as a result of it?
Not at all, Senator. The judges explained in their opinions that, yes, the initial burden for fair use is on the defendant, but the defendants in both cases provided evidence that there was no output of infringing works. And the question then becomes, will the plaintiffs present contrary evidence? And neither judge found evidence of outputs that had substantially similar copies of the plaintiff's works.
But through it all, Hawley was the worst, with comments like,
what you mean to say is it may benefit American corporations. It may impoverish American citizens, but it will benefit American corporations.
As if he's the one on the side of the little guy and not simping for the big content cartels. And as if Meta didn't make their models open source so that anyone could use them, big or small. I searched through a transcript, and according to the transcript, open source wasn't mentioned once in the entire proceeding. The benefits to you and me were not only never mentioned, they were dishonestly denied.
They're coming to claiming fair use after they've stolen Mr. Baldacci's work. They didn't take it from the library. They didn't license it. They didn't buy it.
And if it's fair use, they don't have to. Again, that's the whole point of fair use.
It just sounds strange to me to say that the United States as a nation is going to benefit from the mass violations of its citizens' rights. I thought what made us a nation was our common citizenship, the things that we agree on together, the rights that we hold in common.
Yeah, except for those pesky ones like the First Amendment.
I want to live on a different planet if this can go on and it's perfectly legal.
Well, maybe we can arrange that. So all of that makes Josh Hawley this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Why Stand You Here, You Incompetent Jackanapes edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Henri Poincaré. It is far better to foresee even without certainty than not to foresee at all. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.